Welcome back on this Friday, 18 minutes after 7 right now. We want to talk about algae. That sounds pretty fascinating, right? Well, it is. It's interesting. We're going to dig into it here. You may be familiar with the algae bloom, that it continues to cause some issues on Utah Lake as well as other Utah waterways. And university professor and students are working now to battle the algae at the source. And we have with us today Professor Kevin Shurtleff with Utah Valley University. Thanks so much for coming with us. And I'm pretty excited to learn more about this. Tell us about this barge that you're using on Utah Lake to scoop up algae.
So the whole barge project started in 2017 in the lab, where we were actually trying to find ways to separate the microalgae, these very small organisms, from the water, which is a difficult problem because they're so small. And so we tried 7 different methods back in 2017, 18, 19, until we found one that we thought would work. And we started with a very small system in the laboratory, and then it grew from there. And so in 2021, received funding from the state of Utah. We had the barge built in Louisiana. It's all aluminum, prevent corrosion, it lasts longer on the lake. And so once they shipped it here, then we put our technology, which is the, we call them filter presses, along with a filter aid that we add. And we actually patented the technology to that technology for harvesting algae from the water and removing it.
That's pretty cool. We're just seeing a video of that barge right now. So how exactly does that work? It looks like they're spray guns or something.
Yeah, so on the front of the barge, there's we call it the boom, and it basically suctions water up, just like a vacuum. It pulls the water in, the algae-contaminated water into the boat, and then we mix a filter aid in there. Right now we're using cellulose, which is powdered wood fibers, and then we pass the mixture of algae-contaminated water and the filter aid, we pass that through what's called a filter press. This is used in a wastewater facility to remove sludge from the water. And what that does is it captures the cellulose, and the cellulose captures the algae, but lets the water pass through, and then we pass the water through the filters, and it's discharged back into the lake, much cleaner than it was when we sucked it in.
Like a recycler then?
Yeah, we call it harvesting because we're going to end up we can permanently remove the algae from the water with this system, but then we actually can reuse the algae for other things like a fertilizer, a natural fertilizer, or soil amendment. Actually, with cellulose, we could use it as a potential biomass biofuel, but we'd like to do research on that, but we haven't. So we're not recycling. Well, we're kind of recycling the water after cleaning it up and removing the algae. And with one pass through our system, we remove about 60% of the algae. So we don't want to remove all the algae. The algae is important to the environment.
Right.
The ducks eat it, the fish eat it. It's just when it gets to high concentrations. So we're trying to go around and prevent it from reaching high concentrations where it becomes harmful.
Has it become pretty serious and harmful?
Oh yeah, we've had algae blooms on Utah Lake. We can only spot clean. We're only one boat. We can spot clean maybe 40-acre area each day when we're operating on the lake. And so we just spot clean areas where people interact with the lake. So marinas, beaches, things like that, where people are potentially swimming in the water. We want to keep that water at low concentration of algae so that it's not harmful.
So is Utah Lake one of the hotbeds then?
Oh yeah, for sure. In Utah, I mean, it's our largest body of water. Well, other than the Great Salt Lake. Great Salt Lake actually has a particular species of algae as well that survives in salt water. But as far as freshwater lakes and recreation, Utah Lake is a focus of art. And that's what we're paid by the state of Utah and the Utah Lake Authority. We're paid to operate that boat on Utah Lake specifically.
So do you need more barges?
We would like to see more barges, yeah. Even on Utah Lake, because we travel to one marina each day, I have 2 students who operate the boat. They operate it from May to August, 5 days a week during the weekdays, Monday through Friday, for 5 hours a day. And so they can clean about one area a day. And so they move around to different areas, Utah Lake State Park, Linden Marina where we dock. They try and keep that clean, Saratoga Springs Marina, American Fork Marina. But because we're only one boat, we can only go once a day, and sometimes that's not enough. Algae can actually double their mass, or the amount of algae, in one day. So if you start with a pound of algae in the water, The next day it's 2 pounds, the next day it's 4 pounds, the next day it's 8 pounds. It can really grow quickly. So our one boat, sometimes when the weather's really warm and the algae is blooming, it's hard to keep up with it with just one boat. So we'd like to see multiple boats on Utah Lake, but also we'd love to see boats that can travel around to other areas.
Yeah, well, that's not the only place that we have problems.
Almost every lake in Utah has had problems at one time or another with algal blooms, high concentrations of algae. Yeah.
So I guess this is a patented project, right? No one's really done what you're doing.
Yeah, that's right. UVU received a patent on the technology of adding the filter aid to help remove the algae with the filter press. It turns out that the filter press by itself doesn't work. The algae plugs it up, it prevents water from flowing through it. So adding the filter aid is a really important part of the process. And so we patented that, and then we also patented the concept of putting it on a mobile platform, a boat in particular, so we can go target the areas where we want to keep it clean. We want to remove the algae.
I guess this is something maybe where other states could use this technology too?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, this technology, I mean, we are happy at UVU to license our technology, and so we'd love to have people come to us. We'd share the technology, all the information we can to help them set up their own algae harvesting boats.
So I assume it's pretty much the summer months where this is really needed because the heat causes this algae to bloom.
That's exactly right. So algae need three things to really bloom or to grow rapidly, and that is they need nutrients. These are carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus, primary nutrients to feed. And of course our lakes all have those nutrients in them. They need sunlight because they're photosynthetic organisms. They use photosynthesis, sunlight, to convert the carbon and nutrients into their body mass into growing. And then finally they need warm water. In chemistry you have this saying where if you increase the temperature by 10 degrees, it doubles the reaction rate. And so as we saw this year on Utah Lake in particular, when it hit over 100 degrees, you have several days of 90 to 100 degree weather, then it's prime for algae bloom. The algae love that. They also love calmer water so they don't get mixed up because they have to be at the surface to get sunlight. So,
and of course, people and animals want to stay away from that stuff.
They should stay away from it. Sometimes the animals don't, and so even on Utah Lake and other lakes where dogs have, for example, a dog has drank the water, quite a bit of the water. If it's in the middle of a bloom, then it can be literally toxic to those animals. It's toxic to the fish as well. So people tend to not go in the water when there's an algal bloom going on. It's not pleasant. It's kind of gross looking, and so that's why we focus on areas where people interact with the lake, is so that people will feel comfortable going in. And Utah Lake is a beautiful lake.
Yeah,
I mean, I love it. I've had my grandkids out there on Utah Lake and on the beaches, and so that's why we try and focus on those areas where people interact with the lake to keep those clean and not harmful, right? Free of algae blooms.
Is this pretty pricey?
So the state of Utah gratefully funded us initially to build the algae harvesting boat. The boat itself, it's 34 feet long, 10 feet wide, with all the equipment fully loaded. It was $260,000 that the state of Utah supplied us. And they also supplied us with money to run it for the first 2 years. So we've been operating the boat on Utah Lake May through August when the algae blooms are important, right? When the water's warmer and the algae blooms can potentially occur. We operate May through August, and it costs us about $40,000 for that time frame to pay the students, to get supplies, things like that. So gratefully, we were funded by the university for 1 summer, 1.5 summers, and then the Utah Lake Authority, our partner, has been partnering with us to do the algae harvesting, or to fund the algae harvesting during the past summer, this summer, and the half of the summer before. And we really appreciated our partnership with the Utah Lake Authority. However, our funding is not guaranteed. Every summer, we're not sure whether we're going to have the funding or not to operate it.
Well, with the results, maybe that will help your cause, right?
Talking to people like yourself, that helps get the word out to people who are interested in keeping the lake, spot cleaned.
Well, Kevin Shurtleff, Utah Valley University, thanks so much for coming in. This is fascinating stuff.
Thank you for having me.
And I've never met anyone that knew so much about algae.
Yeah, I loved it.
That's right. You're passionate about your work. All right. Thanks so much and good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, remember that you can stay up to date with all the news, sports, and weather with the KUTV2 News app. It is a great tool. Scan the QR code on the screen, and you can download the app and always be on top of everything.